Om. 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 Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavatam Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vridavarshini Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusantathami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pratipaha Sarvopanishado Gavaha Dogdha Gopalanandanaha Partho Vatsasudhir Bhokta Dugdam Geetamritam Mahat Vasudev Vasutam Devam Kamsa Chanura Mardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So again, welcome everyone to our next edition of our 5th chapter. So as you can see, this chapter is titled Sannyasa, Karma Sannyasa Yoga. So that is what this chapter is all about. And as you know, it begins with, a very profound question by Arjuna to Krishna, where he's asking, do I just run away? Isn't that better to become a monk? And or should I just stay and, fulfill my duty as a karma yogi? To some extent, I think the clarity is dawning on Arjuna, but he still is not totally clear. I think the sort of the tamas aspect in him is saying that, let's just run away. I'm done, that kind of attitude. But Krishna is like, wanting to make sure that, okay, this student of mine is now understood to some extent. Let me just tell him that, you can't just renounce everything and go away just like that. It's not really giving up physically everything, which is actually very comforting for all of us, right? I don't have to run away from all the way from America to India and then from India to Himalayas. I don't have to do that, right? So I just need to really understand what is my purpose in life. Now, this is something that in the corporate world, we always say, oh, yes, let's talk about goals and objectives. What is a mission? What is a vision? Let's look into that, So, and for all this, they always say, you've got to do something. Well, in Hinduism, especially in Vedanta, we don't have to do anything, we don't even have to go all the way driving somewhere for a class. We can just sit where I am and I can realize. That's basically what Hinduism is all about, right? So this is the kind of message that you will see really coming out in the 5th chapter. So that's this aspect which you really can understand here. So as always, for the reflection time, I take some of these concepts in the 5th chapter and try to bring it out in a way that we can totally kind of, really understand Bhagavad Gita, that as much as there is so much amount of Sanskrit, there is so much amount of shlokas, but we don't have to get frightened away. They are very, very simple concepts. And the simplicity, I'm going to bring it out again today in some pictures you've already seen. But again, it's to bring about this aspect of why am I here? Am I not happy with everything? Am I not peaceful? But what is it that I have to still unwind myself from? The key is, what am I still unwinding, from myself? When we go to bed in the evening, we unwind ourselves. We totally say, okay, this is it. I'm going to relax, put some music on, soft music, and then maybe do a little bit of yoga poses and just totally unwind, and then gently just fall into that sleep and that deep sleep, right? But most of my time, I'm really not in deep sleep. I'm actually awake. So when I'm awake, how can I understand that absolute nature which I see in that sleep? How can I really operate from that level in my waking state? That's what we want to get to. That same state where I'm completely unaware of everything. Of course, in deep sleep state, we do have also the Anandamaya Kosha operating, the asanas are operating. However, everything else has gone to sleep, correct? But in the waking state, if I can bring myself to that level where there is absolute calmness, absolute serenity, absolute peace, even when I'm going through all the challenges, customers are calling me, my project team is wanting things to be done, my children are demanding my attention. In and through all that, how can I attain that peace? So with that, just a few things from you. What do you see as your challenges which are keeping you bound and which prevents you from taking you to that peace? What do you think? Sometimes it's important to articulate some of this, because sometimes the reason for articulation is we take it for granted. This is my life. And we kind of just, we're in autopilot mode. All the things that's going around me is always there next to me. And in some cases, they're beautiful, they're pleasurable. But in many cases, we don't recognize that there's the same pleasure which gives me pleasure. After a period of time, if I do not know how my hold is on it, it can lead to a lot of pain. Everything in the world, right? All these gadgets, if I have my iPhone next to me, it gives me so much amount of possibilities. But the second it is away from me, my mind is so restless. Where is my phone? Just a simple example I'm giving, but you can extrapolate that to everything. The same thing which has got so much of potential, so much things that keeps me connected, can cause pain too. I don't want to sound very negative, but just something that we need to be aware of. So again, what are the challenges and things that we all face today? What do you think?
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
It's from I'm talking from the BMI point of view. It's just, it's like it's getting through the day-to-day activities and staying just on top of your so-called to-do list is what is, keeping us on our toes. It's end of the day, once you're on the bed, you're thinking, oh my God, I thought I finished so many, but by the time you check for the next day, there's even longer list, and you're like, really? What did I spend my whole time doing then? I was, in Hindi, they say jhak marna. It's like, is that what I did? Kind of, it's so. eh, there are times when that thought comes, and I try to hold on to that thought that what did I do with myself? This so-called to-do list is going to be there. As long as I'm here, the to-do list is going to be there. But how do I make it productive for myself? Doesn't mean that I have to add more things to the to-do list. It just means that to-do list is going to be there. How do I develop myself?
So to-do list is necessary. It is absolutely necessary, but I cannot allow the to-do list to be my rope here, holding me to it.
Exactly.
I have to list it down, and of course I have to view it day to day, or different times of the day. But then that is not my shackle. That is not what is going to keep me bound.
It's not my start and the end. It is it's a part of life. You have to do it, but you don't have to get all caught up and get all, get carried away.
Anybody else? Anybody else has anything?
I was going to say, just the balancing act of the different aspects that we are involved in, because it's not just talking about to-do list. It's not just one straight list, right? It's like all these tangents, and sometimes it literally entangles us the way we see in the picture. Even if we think that we don't want to, there are demands from either the family or the society. So at that point, you really feel like, okay, maybe Himalayas is the best option. It's just me. So, so there's the corporate side of things, and then there's the social side of things. And then within each web, there are these tangents, right? So, so even if you set boundaries, you are bound by obligations to your corporation or your family or the society at large. And so even if you want to say no, then there are others who will question your loyalty to them.
Right.
So how do you manage that? I think my time goes most in trying to figure out how do I know where to set my boundaries, but it may come across as I'm being selfish or rude. But then how do you manage to, maintain your equilibrium if you're not so-called selfish,
Exactly. And, in the corporate world, and even when we read a lot of the regular magazines or whatever, or of course, nowadays nobody reads magazines. You look at internet for what kind of websites you can go to get some advice, self-help, or, like positive psychology or whatever, those so many different things are there, right? So in all of them, they would give you a step-by-step process from where you are as this body, as Suvarna said, as this BMI. And then from there on say, well, and this is why I was using that example of, the soft yoga before you go to sleep, or, have mindfulness, and try and see how you can practice more better teamwork. All that is at the external level, external level when I think I'm this body. And this is why the 5th chapter, there are such beautiful shlokas, this Navadware Pure Dehi, chapter, shloka 13, I think, which talks about that at the end of the day, I am this self sitting in this encasement, if you will, of this body. But when I take myself to the body, that's where all the problems come. So it's a question of trying to be away from that. And that is why we look at, when we look at this figure of what does this figure really represent for us, it is a person, a bound person with all these to-do lists, with all these obligations that we think, that's the biggest point, is that I think that thought process is such an important. I think I'm this very valuable person, or I think I cannot get out of some things. I think, if I'm not there, the whole world is going to collapse, So this is how we think this huge thing, like, what is that? This example in Christianity where he's having the whole world in his shoulders and he's bending down. That's how we think we are, and that's all these shackles. So the question then comes is, what do we have to do to remove this bondage? And as I said before, in our day-to-day world, we can come across a lot of superficial things on, and I'm using the word superficial in a way to understand that they are at the surface level, What do we have to do to remove the bondage? Well, the answer that Bhagavad Gita and all our scriptures in Hinduism say, you don't have to do anything. Okay. I know the answer is very, very surprising here, but basically it says you don't have to do anything because the ropes were never there. Okay. That's the whole idea. We have to get it into our mind that the ropes, those bondage, everything was never, ever there. I am still that very pure Brahman, which, the ropes totally out, and I'm completely free of all this. So that's what Bhagavad Gita really teaches us, how we are already free. So liberating. I mean, that the idea of Bhagavad Gita is already liberating. It's not that I have to strive towards liberation. The examples that is given is sometimes, when you want something, like I think it's Ramakrishna Paramahamsa's example, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa's example is that, somebody wants to get something. So he says, well, I'm going to go to the village to get something. That's actually going to a village to something. But there is this other example that is given, which in Atma Bodh, which you would have read also. What is it? It's a very beautiful, I have to bring that. It's about this necklace on your neck. The necklace is always there. You just didn't know it was there. It's such a beautiful term. Maybe next week I'll remember to get that thing. Is that our nature is like this necklace. It's always there. I don't have to go anywhere to figure out where my necklace is. It's always there. So, the example of going to a village to get something, no, it's something that you already have. So you don't have to go anywhere. So Bhagavad Gita teaches us how we are already free. I already have what I want. Everything is within myself. And that's the only thing that Bhagavad Gita teaches, but that is all. And that is the essence of all the Upanishads. But we are unable to see all this because we live as a false identity. We are constantly identified with our body, mind, intellect. And from there, all the names and the roles, I'm the Sunitha, I'm this person, director, and I'm this grandmother, I'm this father, and this, all these things. I know it sounds, it falls not from a point of view, yes, we need that identity. When I'm in this transaction world, I need that identity. But it is only an identity. I was not a grandmother before, now I'm a grandmother, So it was, if I look at it from that point, Swami Chinmayananda gives this example of this girl, this daughter. She, for 25 years or whatever, she was in the house. Did she know that she was going to be, a wife? Did she know she was going to be a mother? Did she know she was going to be a grandmother? All these roles came later. So those are all roles that we play. But this word false has to be identified, has to be construed in the sense of what is my true identity. My true identity is something else, but I've taken up all these identities, which then I become involved with. So how do we live then is not as this house, which I've taken it up upon myself as this body, but where we find that if I take up myself as a house, I have to take up all the challenges that come with the house, where all the pipes and everything are clogged with all these kind of emotional grudges, stress, anxiety, everything. If I'm ready to take all that up and live with it, go through ups and downs, fine. Bhagavad Gita is saying, go ahead, live it, but don't come running back to me saying that I'm not happy, I'm not peaceful. So we need this Bhagavad Gita to cleanse our mind and to get the strength of conviction and move ahead in our life. And, we talk about such great conquerors in our Puranas, like, Hiranyakashipu, Ravana, all of them wanted to conquer this entire world and everything. We had even people like Alexander. And then even in recent times, I will not talk about what happened in recent times and everything, who want to conquer and everything. But nothing like conquering our own self. When I conquer my own self, that sense of conquering something is a lot more than anything that can happen. So this is what Bhagavad Gita really brings, that idea for us, is to make the mind free from any attachment of any kind. When I do that, I'm already completely free. I have conquered everything. That's the message which you will see being echoed in this 5th chapter. So prior to the shlokas 13, we saw how Lord Krishna was trying to convince Arjuna that the path of action was the most important thing for him and for all of us also. And in this, he explained that you can be in this path and still practice detachment, slowly and slowly, how to detach yourself from everything that you're doing. You do everything what you're doing, just in the mind, recognize that all that is just a part of this naiva kinchit karomi ti shrunvan pashyan, all that thing where he said that you do what you have to do, but recognize that every aspect within yourself is playing with everything. Just like the eyes are playing with the sense objects, the ears are listening to the music, the mind is thinking, the intellect is deciding all that, but think about this way and then live. Then from this shlokas here, we're coming to that unwinding. Really, who is that person who is going through all this? That is the karma sannyas. That is the aspect of renunciation, which is what he was trying to show here. So the idea is that for all of us, who work in the world and who this one, we can wear all these clothes, everything. We don't have to really become somebody like this and run away. I can do all this. Bhagavad Gita teaches me that I can attain that same peace in and through everything that I am doing and be happy, be serene, so that's the idea. So in Shloka 13, we see that Sarva Karmani Manasa. That's why in the mind, I drop all these karma. Sarva Karmani Manasa Sanyasyaste Sukham Vashi. I can be completely happy, and Navadware Pure Dehi Naiva Kurvan Na Karayan. So this person is living within this body of 9 gates, and the person, this essence which is there within myself, it does not make the body do, or it does not make anything do. It just, and we'll come to those examples here. So sannyas is nothing but a renunciation at the mental level. That is what is. It's not about taking clothes and everything, but mind you, taking those orange clothes or taking those yellow clothes, everything that is necessary, because it brings a sense of who I am. It is showing me the path. So that is necessary, absolutely. But clothes do not make a person. Just like, how this English saying is, which is, don't judge a book by its cover, correct? So for us who are in the Grihastha ashram, it is important to mentally renunciate, mentally understand this. So our body is like the city here, where the city consists of everything, the hospitals and all that stuff. Just like how everything is there in my mind, I can make it go. And that is where this body is compared to the fortress, which we saw that. But just like how the sun doesn't get involved with the activities, so too this essence of who I really am, I do not get involved. I just provide whatever is needed, in the sense, in this case, it's the consciousness principle. Without the consciousness principle, there is nothing that can happen. Just like how without the sun, the whole world would not even exist. So just like that, my idea is that I'm that Atman. And how do I live? I am completely, totally contented, satisfied, bliss, happiness. That's how the aspect of Atman lives within the Navadware Pure Dehi. So in Shloka then 14, the question might arise, okay, you're saying that I'm that Atman, then who is really doing all these things? Who is the doer? Who is the enjoyer? So we saw that, again, he says, na kartritvam na karmani lokasya srijati prabhu, na karma phala sanyogam svabhavastu pravartate. The key word here is swabhava, which is everything is doing by itself. The nature of what is the thing, it is doing that. So for example, my hands are moving. So it is the nature of my hands to move. There is my vasanas, which is driving my hands to move, to explain something. All that is part of my hands, but that Atman is not moving. That's the idea. So what is a good example to think about here is this crystal and the blue flower. That's what we talked about last time, which is, we saw that the crystal, which is totally colorless, okay, that crystal, when it is in the presence of the flower, it takes up the color of the flower itself, right? So this is the idea we are seeing here. So swabhavastu pravartate, Atma doesn't do anything by itself, but in its proximity, everything happens. In its proximity, I take myself as a doer. I take myself that when I'm explaining something and somebody says, yeah, I get it, that enjoyer, that part of me which enjoys this aspect of the fact that, yes, one particular concept was explained, that is part of my transactional nature. So that is the idea. So if I have this idea, there is so much that I can take home, the message. For example, somebody's getting angry. You can easily say swabhava, that's a swabhava. But he by himself has the same Atman which is in me, but it is that swabhava of, or that's his vasanas, that is really making that person do something. So it is all in the upadhi. That person by itself is totally not affected by it. So this, we gave some examples with the fan rotating, the bulb lighting up. The rotation of the fan is because of the mechanism of the blades, the operational part of it, the switch, the base, everything. And same thing with the light. It is all because of the filament and whatever kind of colors you want to give, all that. But electricity is the same in both of them. Electricity doesn't say that I'm making, electricity is the reason for making the fan. Electricity is there giving what it needs to for the fan. But the rotation of the fan, the age of the fan, all that plays a part in how much the rotation happens. There is so much that is part of the equipment which is making it happen, right? We also gave this example of the Pac-Man video game, where the process of running, everything is inbuilt in the game. All we have is the electricity is not in this case, it's a computer game. So we have, of course, the electricity is fueling the whole thing, but everything, the rules of the game, everything is inbuilt in that Pac-Man game itself. So all this we said. Now in all this, whether it's the action itself, the doership, none of them is something that Atman will take responsibility for. So that's the aspect we need to understand, that that ropes, when we talked about, is all in the transactional self. When I take myself to be that particular role, I have to suffer the consequences or enjoy whatever I get for that role. The role is the one. So I constantly have to tell, who am I? Am I the role? Am I the role? Am I that essence? That's the idea behind it. So then Shloka 15, he talks about how that not only that the action, the doership, the enjoyership, but this Atman doesn't even take any kind of the punyam or the papam from the results of the action. So when I do something, for example, I'm just giving this example of, I'm driving the car and I accidentally hit somebody. Who bears the responsibility for it? It's basically this transactional self of mine, which is bearing the responsibility for it. Atman by itself does not take the responsibility. So, for example, it's not the fuel, the petrol. I cannot blame the petrol for it, correct? I can only blame the person who is driving it to be responsible for the accident. So that's the idea, which is na adate kaschachit papam, na cha eva sukrutam vibhuhu. Vibhuhu referring to that Atman, which is all pervading. Vibhuhu is meaning that, it means all pervading. It also, there's another Vividam Bhagavati, which is, it is also, it appears in many different forms. So that's the beautiful name for a beautiful meaning for this word Vibhuhu. It's infinite, it's everywhere, it takes on different forms, and we unfortunately mistake, that's our problem, is we mistake that Vibhuhu to be responsible. It's just taking different forms here. And even though it is tasteless and everything here, it is never the doer or the enjoyer here. And Ajnanam, it's only because of our own ignorance, Avritam Jnanam, which is covering this knowledge, Avritam, which covers it, people get mistaken. They get this mistaken identity, but Atman itself does not take on any of the papam, sins, or does it take any of the merits? That's the idea, which is what he's saying here. And examples to look at it is that just like we have day and night, heat and cold, or like white and black, these are all just temporary, right? So just like, when I'm way, way above the earth and I see the our earth be on one part, I can see the night and I can see the light here, but I'm way above it, right? I can see that whole thing happening here. So too, all the dualities that we go through, the pain, the sorrow, the pleasure, then also at the mental level, the emotions we go through, at the intellectual level, when somebody accuses us, somebody praises us, or intellectual level where I take ownership about things. All this is again at the transaction level, but as the Atman, I'm way above all these dualities. So I'm neither affected by, neither am I a doer, neither am I enjoyer, neither I take the sins, etc. So all that was explained. And then we have, last time I shared this shloka here, which also talks about the same thing. And then in shloka 16th, he talks about that, but for somebody who has really understood their identity, so jnanena tu tat ajnanam, it's only through knowledge. Ultimately, I can do so many things in this world, but if I don't recognize what is driving everything, what is the knowledge behind it, then I'll never achieve that. So jnanena tu tad ajnanam yesham nashitam atmanaha. But to those whose ignorance is destroyed by the knowledge of the self, for such people, tesham, for them, adityavat, like the sun, adityavat jnanam. So just like the sun, that knowledge prakashayati tatparam. So that knowledge reveals that supreme Brahman. Now again, somebody may ask, oh, does that mean that if I study enough Bhagavad Gita, I will see the light burning within myself? No, that is not what he's trying to say. All he's trying to say is the very fact that nothing affects you anymore. You just see the whole world going around you and you say, okay, this too shall pass. Even the thought of this too shall pass will not even come. That is the idea behind where he's saying. So it's a very nice, beautiful shloka. Jnanena tut ajnanam tesham nashitam atmanaha tesham adityavat jnanam prakashayati tatparam. It just reveals that tatparam, tat referring to that Atman, Param, which is the absolute Atman, supreme Atman. So the example is, when you have the whole sun shining, okay, the sun is shining everywhere, and you put the small candle, do you think that candle's glow is even visible when the sun is so completely shining, right? So this is how Atman reveals itself. When I recognize that I am that absolute Atman, there is the small happiness that I was getting out of it just totally disappears because you recognize you're that absolute Atman, which totally takes care of removing that whole ignorance out. So that's the idea here. And in again, two beautiful shlokas from, actually quite a few here from Atma Bodh. It really makes you go back and read these shlokas. After studying Bhagavad Gita, when you go back and read Atma Bodh, it is so beautiful because starting from the first shloka itself, Bhagavan Shankaracharya mentions about how that, tapobik sheena papanam, Shantanam Vitaragina Mumukshuna Apekshoyam Atma Bodho Vidiyate. I'm composing this textbook of Atma Bodh for those people who have completely understood why they're here, why they're studying here. They've already done so much amount of tapas, and they are just only craving for that knowledge. They're free from all other cravings. For such people, Atma Bodh is made. And the two shlokas which compares to here is Deha Anyavat na me janma. Dehanyavat na me janma. Jara kashalaya dayaha. I'm other than this body. So for me, thus not for me is this birth, wrinkling, senility, death. We talked about the 6 modifications of the body, jayate, apakshiyate, viparinamate, all the modifications of birth and death and old age. And trust me, it's after you turn 50, then is when you really recognize that what the body is going through. Until then, we take it for granted. We fill it up with all kinds of junk, and then we worry about, oh my God, what did I do, So, but then that's why the shlokas, of course, we study them ahead of time. But then again, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense then, because I know we study Atma Bodh in the beginning of our study group thing, we do Kindle-like, we do self-unfoldment, then we do Atma Bodh. But then look at this beauty of the shlokas, it says, I am other than this body. I'm only for the body is this birth and death and all this old age. Shabda Adi Vishayihi Sangaha. With sense objects such as sound, association is nil. As a self, I am without sense organs. Nir indriya taya nacha. I am that self without any sense organs. And this example of sunlight, I wanted to bring that in also because of the word Aditya, which was mentioned there. Atma Chaitanyam Ashritya Deha Indriya Mana Diyaha Swakriyartheshu Vartante Surya Lokam Yatha Janaha. So depending on the self of the nature of consciousness, the body, mind, etc., they engage in the respective activities. Just like sunlight heralds the activity among people. But I am separate. I, the Atman, am separate from this body, the senses, and the mind, and etc. So then in Shloka 17, which we touched upon last time, then, okay, if I'm like the sun, and if I am that total shining, what happens now? What am I going through? When that knowledge really dawns upon me. So he says, at that point in time, everything just completely rests in that tat, tat buddhayaha. The ignorance is completely gone. So my intellect has no more questions, no more doubts. Tadatmanaha, my mind is no more really rushing out into those paltry things, because my mind has recognized that all those things are, just temporary. I'm not the doer, I'm not the karta, I'm not the enjoyer of anything, I'm not the bhokta. So I'm totally convinced at that point. Tan nishtha. Nishtha is a beautiful word. Nishtha meaning I'm completely 100% convinced. Nobody needs to tell me anything more. And I recognize that tat parayanaha. That is where my goal is. So when I have all this, I go to that place, Gachanti. I reach that place where I don't have to keep coming back. I don't have to take one body after another. Like I don't have to take, go from one company to another company or anything. This is how we have, right? When we are young, we are looking for something more. And so I switch companies, I switch roles, I switch, professions where I'm constantly looking for something. And, but when I have this knowledge, then I recognize that within myself, I don't have to go anywhere. And that's what Jnana Nirduta Kalmashaha. It completely removes every kind of defects within myself. And this tat was already explained from all the verses from all the way from 13. In 13, it was Dehi, Vashi, which was again in the Navadware Pure Dehi, that shloka has this. Then Prabhuhu as the witness, Vibhuhu as the all-pervasive, Tat Param and Tat. So all these examples were given here. And so here in this shloka, what does that Tat mean? Tat Buddhayaha, where my mind is completely absorbed in that Supreme Brahman. Tat Atmanaha. So I completely, because of my absorption even at the mind level, there is no doubts at all about where I need to focus my attention. Tannishtaha, because in Nididhyasanam, I, after having recognized what is really driving me, what is the driving force within me, and I recognize the driving force is all attached to that false identity within myself, where I recognize that if I am this Sunitha, I am this ego, then I need all this. But in Tannishtaha, I've recognized that I am that Tatparam, I am that Atman. When I do that, then I get into the state of Nididhyasanam. In Nididhyasanam, or that ultimate meditation, where Swami Tejomananda beautifully talks about as this effortless meditation, effortless, totally without any effort. There is no struggle at all, because you have recognized you are that absolute self. So where is the struggle? So you recognize that Tat Parayanaha, that stage of that absolute supreme goal, which is that Savikalpa Samadhi, before reaching this Nirvikalpa. Apunaha Avratan. You have actually, there is nowhere to go. Jnana Prapti, you have reached that absolute knowledge. So this is in Viveka Chudamani. We have the shloka Jantunam Narajanma Durlabha Mataha Pumsvam Tato Viprata Tasmad Vaidika Dharma Marga Parata Vidvat Vidvat. I have to sing in the tune, only then it comes. Jantunam Narajanma Durlabha Mataha Pumsvam Tato Viprata Tasmad Vaidika Marga Parata Vidvat Masat Atma Param. Oh, I'm not getting that part. Atmanatma Vivechanam Svanubhava Brahmatmana Samstitihi Muktirno Shata Janma Koti Sukrutaihi Punyair Vina Labhyate. Basically trying to say that this whole human birth which has been given to me is so rare. It is there only for me to do this Atma Anatma Viveka, to recognize who I am. I am that Atman. I'm not this appendages, which is this body, mind, intellect. Swa Anubhavaha Brahmatmana Samstitihi Muktir no Shata Janma Koti Sukrutaihi. I've gotten this body after so many millions of births. Let me just use this towards discrimination between the unreal, recognizing who I am, and to fulfill that absolute goal here. And in Kathopanishad, you also have the shloka, which is when the five senses cease and are addressed, and the mind rests with them, and the thought ceases, that is the highest state. Yada panchavatishtante jnanani manasa saha buddhishchana visheshate tam ahuhu paramam gatim. So this is from Kathopanishad, which all talks about that absolute state where I want to go. That's what the knowledge takes you to. That's what the shloka 17 is referring to. And again, another beautiful shloka from Atmabodh, which says, depending on the self, the nature of consciousness, the body, senses, mind, intellect, they engage the respective activities, just like sunlight heralds activity. This shloka can go with almost all the 3 or 4 shlokas that we talked about today. So this is the idea of karma sannyas. Up till here, now the section on karma sannyas is over, where it ends. It has ended in such a beautiful note about really who I am that Atman, and I am that nature of consciousness. All this body, mind, senses, and everything are only as instruments which is driving my vasanas to exhaust. This instrument has been given only for that purpose. It is not meant for a purpose of taking more things in this birth and then taking another birth to exhaust all of them. That is not what it is. But this is meant only for that purpose. Just like how, this is why in our culture, the sun is given so much amount of prominence, because the sun is the closest I can take as a representative of that Atman. Every time when I look at the sun, I have to think, okay, how can I be like you? You are giving so much, yet you never even show that you're giving this, So just a beautiful shloka for meditation also, I think, about. So the next section, which is in shlokas 18 to this, we have actually about 6 verses, which basically shows us what that state of perfect freedom looks like, And this is from this perspective of actually looking at from my experiences of a world, but it's only from the experience of a world, because from that absolute self, right? When I recognize that Atman, literally we don't have any ladders to progress. We don't have any, if you're going on a trail, it will tell you, 0.2 miles, or even when you go in Kensington Park, if you walk there, it will tell you, okay, you're at 1 mile post, because the whole thing is about 8 miles, Kensington Park and Brighton, Michigan. But you have that signpost which explains this. For us, when I recognize that I'm that absolute Atman, there are no signposts that is needed, right? But so from the aspect of the world, how does somebody who is already there? In chapter 5 also, we have these shlokas. And if you remember, we have the whole Sthita Prajna Lakshana from chapter 2, right? There we saw that. And then when you come to chapter 12, you will actually see the beautiful shlokas on bhakti, which is explained. And chapter 14, you'll see about somebody who is beyond all the gunas. Chapter 14 talks about the sattva, rajas, tamas gunas, because of which, again, we are bound to the world. It talks about gunatitam. So now in this shlokas, 6 shlokas, you will see the description of somebody who is established in Brahmanishta. So that's the examples which we are seeing in shloka 18 now. So very beautiful shloka here. Vidya vinaya sampanne Brahmane kavi hastini. Vidya vinaya sampanne Brahmane kavi hastini. Shuni chaiva shvapake cha. Shuni chaiva shvapake cha. Pandita samadarshinaha. Pandita samadarshinaha. Vidya vinaya sampanne Brahmane kavi hastini. Shuni chaiva shvapake cha. Pandita samadarshinaha. So, as we said, these are pointers towards for us to see how does a person who has attained that knowledge, how does this person on whom this knowledge has dawned, like Adityavat, like the sun, how does a person really look at the world? Well, you see that the person looks at oneness. Today when we hear a lot of this, oh, you have to see oneness in everything, oneness. But how does it really happen, right? That's why we went through all these shlokas, which explains about the relevance of knowledge Ultimately, it is jnanam, jnanam, jnanam. Without knowledge, nothing can happen. And it is only knowledge that allows us to have that vision of oneness. So a person, like a sage, such a person shows that oneness. He has that equal vision, which is totally born out of that aspect of, because such a person is so calm, is totally equipoised. He has that equanimity. So they're able to have that vision of oneness, which you see here. And how is that oneness shown here, for example? So he takes literally about 6 examples, 6 examples on all ends of the spectrum, if you want, if you will. Somebody who is extremely learned, somebody who is not learned, somebody who is a small creature, somebody who is a big creature. So he covers that whole gamut of examples with Vidya Vinaya Sampanne. We probably can go to the next one where I will show you. So Vidya Vinaya Sampanne. Somebody who is extremely learned. Okay, but it is not just the fact that that person is learned, but the person also exhibits a humility, Vidya Dadati Vinayam, right? It says, there's a beautiful Sanskrit thing which says, when a person is extremely learned, that person you will see is totally humble. Humility comes as a very active quality. It's not as if the person is just, will not say anything in conversations or anything because a person knows. Person will say, will exhibit whatever the person is doing. And that is also humility. Humility is in a very active way. The person is extremely learned. The more the person learns, the more humble. So Vidya Vinaya Sampanne, Brahmane, the person is a person who is totally promoted to, who's promoting knowledge, who is a culture. So I've seen where Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane, as a Brahmana who is extremely learned and who exhibits humility. But it could be looked at two different. It could be looked at even a professor in any university who is extremely learned. It could be somebody like that. Brahmane, a person who is, who does all the rituals and who is extremely pious. So it could be somebody like that. Then Gavi, among the animals, the cow represents a very, very sattvic nature because the cow is so giving, right? So it symbolizes the function of providing total nourishment for our society. Everything that the cow does, I mean, literally everything. Not only does it give you milk and everything, but even its fecal matter, if you want it, the cow dung. The cow dung is, I have to say this, we are celebrating Ganesh Chaturthi, right? So we have actually the murti made out of cow dungs, which are being sold. Okay. And cow dung is being exported to countries in the form of its cakes. So there is so much of value in the cow dung. So every part of the cow represents the giving nature of the cow in how it is allowing. And nowadays, the goshalas are becoming very popular here in India. Matter of fact, we are also buying milk from a goshala where we are trying to, support this kind of an environment which is necessary, which keeps up the society, right? So then we have a Hastini, which represents now the dinosaur of the animals, if you will, the biggest of animals. So Hastini, and then you have the dog, which represents, again, you have these 3 animals chosen for its sattvic nature, for its rajasic nature, and for its tamasic nature. And finally, to close the whole picture, of animals and beings that a sage would look at it, such a person, not only would he or she look at a Brahmana with a vision, with an equal vision, with equanimity and equipoise, but also a Shvapaka. Shvapaka, which is Shvapaka meaning a dog eater. Representing, so it's not as if this person is, cutting up dogs and eating it. That's not exactly what it means. It basically means somebody who is at the lowest rung of the human mankind. And I'm sorry, but I can only just think of somebody like, I don't know how many of you had heard about Jeffrey Dahmer. This was, have you ever heard of, you can Google him. But I remember reading about him. This happened about 20 years ago, somewhere in Wisconsin or one of those states. This person literally was a dog eater. A dog eater in the sense of not just eating animals, but human beings. He literally had cut he murdered humans, cut them up, put them in refrigerator and those kind of things. I mean, it's just one of the most horrible crimes that I've ever read about, So Shvapaka, but even to such a person, a sage would look at it, sages would look at with an equal eye, with an equal and vision this one. So this shloka is actually very popular in Bhagavad Gita, Vidya Vinay Sampanne Gavi Hastini, Brahmani Gavi Hastini, Shuni Chaiva Shvapakecha Pandita Samadarshinaha. So the shloka really tells about the highest level of evolution of somebody who has absolutely no judgment, because the person recognizes that in and through every being, whether it's an animal or a human, that person is moving towards his or her own evolution, and they look at with such compassion. And we know about, like Ramana Maharishi's ashram, he would look so compassionately at the peacocks, the dogs which are in the ashram. And so that's the highest level, which again, this is a manner of sadhana for all of us, how to look at the world with equal vision. So which brings, I know it's 7:03, maybe I should stop here, but this is, he talks about how, goes into further to say that this person looks at this world, and when we develop this aspect of equal vision and equanimity, then there is this aspect of no return at all, which is in this world itself, I can actually gain my, reach my goal of that absolute self of who I am really. And that is, we'll talk about this in my next session. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayah, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om shanti shanti shantihi. Om purnamadav purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate. Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you.
Hari Om.
Thank you so much.
Let me, I need to.
Hari Om, thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see how.